Well, welcome everybody to Black Lives Matter in Albemarle County. This is a community talk on social justice this year in Albemarle County. This event is organized and hosted by Albemarle Democrats, Rio District, but it is open to everyone. I'm the co-chair of the Rio District, Nathan Moore, and also on the call is my co-chair, Daisy Stevens Rojas. And Daisy's going to be moderating. There she is. Say hi, Daisy.
Hello, everyone.
Daisy will be moderating comments. Yeah, actually, speaking of, a little housekeeping. This is part of a series of monthly talks that we're hosting on the third Wednesday of each month. Go ahead and mark your calendars for next month on October 21st at 7 p.m. 5th District U.S. Congressional candidate Dr. Cameron Webb will be joining us right here on this very Zoom call to talk about racial disparities in healthcare and the need to get out the vote. So this year, what with the pandemic going on, we are highly encouraging early voting. Early in-person voting at the county registrar's office begins this Friday, September 18th. You can also request an absentee ballot as soon as now if you want in order to vote by mail. You can find out more.
Do it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You can find out more about all these things at elections.virginia.gov. There's also a bunch of us on the Zoom call, and I suspect more people will be coming in. So please go ahead and keep yourself muted if you can. If you want to keep your video on, you're welcome to. But if you have questions or comments, please type those in the chat window. Daisy, again, will monitor those throughout the hour. All right, that's enough housekeeping for now. I'm really pleased and excited to introduce our guest tonight. I want to introduce Tanesha Hudson. She's a community activist, organizer, and filmmaker. Hi, Tanesha. Also, Don Gathers, longtime social justice activist. Hey, Don.
Good evening.
Amanda Moxham is with the Hate Free Schools Coalition. Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
And Wayne Murphy is the Peace Building Chair of Rotary Club District 7610. Hi, Wayne. Cool. So Black Lives Matter is a few things at once. It's the name of a movement, it's a slogan, it's a moral political statement that implies some actions that need to be taken. Don Gathers, what does Black Lives Matter mean in a local context? Don, you're muted. Let's start over there.
Sorry about that. It means that we've still got a long way to go. The mere fact that we still in this particular point in time in history still have to publicly state that means that we still haven't overcome. It means that Dr. King's dream still hasn't been realized. It means that the Black and brown people are still being brutalized all across this country.
What about here in Albemarle County? What's the local context of Black Lives Matter? How do we?
Well, you're talking about a county that according to the numbers, is less than 10% Black. So that in and of itself has its own inherent problems that will present itself. Whether it's in policing, whether it's in housing, whether it's in everyday life. And we've seen that some of the issues that continue to rear their ugly head, not only in Charlottesville, but also in the surrounding county of Albemarle. Black and brown people are struggling, trying to find affordable housing, trying to be able to afford health care, trying to just go on with their everyday lives that are promised to us within the document called the Constitution.
Tanesha, turn to you with kind of the same question. What does Black Lives Matter mean to you in Albemarle County?
Well, I mean, I just want to piggyback off what Don said. We're in 2020, and here we are, well, here I am at 38 years old. I'm still marching for the same things that my grandfather and my cousin, Reverend Reginald A. Johnson, who is very well known for his role in the civil rights movement in Albemarle County. I'm still marching for the same things that he was basically standing up for in the 60s. So like we haven't gotten anywhere. We continue to ask, right, for the things that we feel we need as people of color. And we should be at a point as Black people in general that we just stop asking and we just start, doing it on our own. It's like we're waiting for white people to say, it is okay for you to now do X, Y, Z. No. there's a huge disconnect with people knowing what it is to be free from a mental standpoint, and then to know what it is to live free. Like there's a difference between being free and living free. And so some Black people got it. Some Black people understand. And some Black people don't. And I think that once we come together as individuals on understanding that we can do it on our own, that we don't need everybody else to give us what we naturally have. We naturally have a right to live in peace, just like everyone else. That once we get together and figure that out, I think we'll be much better off.
Tell me more, tease that out a little bit. Being free versus living free. What do you mean?
So there's a difference between living free. You know, a lot of people say that they're free, but they're not really free. You know, they don't live, I live free. I do what everybody else do. Like there's no, you know, if you come at me and I've had instances where my rights were violated, I'm gonna take you to court like anybody else would, you know, and I'm gonna fight you. And I'm gonna fight you in a way that I know I have a right to. You know, I just don't think a lot of people live with the mentality that we don't have to ask, right? So many people just wait to ask, and we don't have to ask. I think the BLM movement for me is just beyond police killings, because that been happening. The police killings aren't new. The recordings are new. Catching it on camera is new. But we've always suffered at the hands of law enforcement. We've always suffered at the level, like policies have always killed us. Albemarle, Don said Albemarle is 10% Black. Well, why is it 10% Black? When we look at property laws, zoning laws, when we look at the things that are in place to take from Black families, to take from Black legacies, you know, those aren't things that were just created by, like that stuff was put in place for a reason. It didn't just happen that way. It was put in place for a reason. So like, we're just not learning the things that we need to learn as Black people to be prepared for when this stuff happens. We're not paying attention to beat the game before it, you know, starts, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you, Tanesha. We're going to come back. There's a lot of good meat in there, and I want to definitely return to some of that. I also want to hear from our next couple panelists as well. Amanda Moxham, you've worked with the Hate Free Schools Coalition for a few years now. What are the key issues of that work?
Sure. It's really focused on educational equity within Albemarle County, and some of the things that have happened over the last few years since we started organizing in that space is an anti-racism policy that got put into effect. A variety of name changing is going on throughout the county with the school systems, or with the schools, and also just a variety of other things to try to not only, you know, I think this actually is a good parallel to how elections work. There's so much energy that gets poured into getting people out to vote. And then as soon as those elections happen, a lot of that support and energy just disappears. And so one of the things that, you know, for the context that we're talking today, I think that's really important to consider is absolutely get people out to vote. I think that's sort of a basic quality that is a great thing to push for. But I think even more importantly is to build the structures in support systems to not only support those candidates once they are elected, but also if a candidate becomes elected who is not someone you originally supported, or even if they are someone you originally supported, the real work is in holding them accountable to do what they said they were going to do when they were running for that election. So, you know, a good example with the Albemarle County Public Schools, we were able to flip the school board this last year. And what that took was not just the campaigning piece of it, but literally before and after all of the school board meetings, we are supporting the school board members who need, we're doing research for them, we're pulling information for them, we're helping with talking points alongside them to make sure that they feel supported by the community. Because without that, I mean, I think we all know these elected positions, it's not something I would want to take on. I think the burden and the energy that it takes to even live in those roles is really exhausting. So anything we can do as a community to surround these candidates with an accountability structure so that we don't allow for things to slide backwards. I think so much work just keeps, it's happening, but I often feel that the support system, once the elections are over, just doesn't exist.
Wayne, I want to bring you into this conversation as well. You come at this as part of the Rotary Club, which brings together professional leaders for humanitarian service. How are the business and professional types who are part of Rotary locally responding to Black Lives Matter?
Well, I think for the most part, they're in favor of,
You muted, Wayne, so I'm not sure how, but you just muted yourself.
sorry.
That's okay. It might have been,
Sorry.
go on.
I think there's
I
sort
heard
of a
that. Most parts
deeper misunderstanding of Black Lives Matter. I don't know, maybe I should say amongst business and professionals, but in the sense that I don't know that we really understand, or that it's sort of like we have to be woke to it. We have to really be educated to it. I myself am involved in a peace building project called New Gen Peace Builders, and we had a host of students recently, a cohort of students recently, that did what we call the Walk of Shame, and we walked around through Charlottesville and saw the statues, and saw the slave block plaque buried under the post office box, and those kinds of exposures, I think, sort of open you up to it and wake you up to the fact that, gee, I never thought I was a racist, and it never even occurred to me that I'm just ignoring these things. I walk by it every day and I don't see it. So I think for me, the Black Lives Movement is to sort of just wake us all to the fact that something has got to be done about this. And I think that waking has to be sort of a buy-in. I don't think you can just convince people. I think they have to be, taught or learned or have some exposure to that whole fact.
I want to bring it back to, you mentioned, and we can open this up to kind of anybody who wants to answer this one or try and tackle it. The last several years, we have seen a number of campaigns around some of those symbolic issues. You mentioned the statues, and I know Hate Free Schools has been very involved with banning Confederate imagery in schools and so on. Even those symbolic changes have met with some major resistance in the county and city and elsewhere. What have the last few years taught you all locally about things?
What has it taught us, or what has it revealed?
Ooh,
Because what it's revealed is what is revealed is the fact that racism is still very much alive, well, and thriving. That it is systemic and that it's generational. The hatred that permeates through the county and through the city has existed and has hung heavily over this area for years. And in modern day society, why should we still have to explain to people what those symbols represent? They know the history of them is present. They know exactly why they went up, when they went up, what they were to represent, and what they continue to represent, and the oppression that was felt because of them. Yet we're still having to educate people to this. That should be saddening and maddening to anyone who has a pulse and a needle on their own moral compass.
Well, and I just want to piggyback off what Don said. You see nothing about positive Blackness anywhere really in America. And the closest that we've gotten to positive Blackness is Sweet Auburn in Atlanta, what they've done with the whole MLK work that Miss Coretta Scott did.
Right.
And the MLK statue that we just got in the late 2010s in DC, right? So, and you know, we can say, well, I'll give you all that you gave us an Arthur Ashe statue. Okay, we can count Arthur Ashe. That's fine. We got an Arthur Ashe statue in Richmond. But there's been no elevation of being Black in America, right? So if we have to deal with the fact that white America or Southern white America, let me correct myself, because it's only in the South that you deal with this, that in Southern white America, that we have to deal with the fact of you throwing Black people, that we're never going to be enough, that we never were enough, and that we have to continue to see images that represented holding us down and holding us back. Now, I know everybody here is very well educated. Now think about that. Just reverse it for a minute and tell me how you would feel if you went to every state in the South and you saw a statue of Nat Turner. How would you feel? Because you learned that he was a bad person because he killed his slave master and he killed white men during slavery, right? So how would you feel if you had to face that every day? Or if your family or your ancestors are from Germany, that you had to face a statue of Hitler every day. If your family were Jewish and they lived in Germany and they were in concentration camps. See, it's about reversing the psychology, right?
Right.
It's about telling a real story that we just really haven't sat down and shared this real truth, because the truth has been kept from America and secretly told to Black people. So it's things that I know my grandfather and other family members that were in their 80s and 90s when they passed, it's things that they've told me that I know that they didn't lie about because I'm witnessing it today in 2020.
And I just want to say that personally, I'd be okay with that statue of Nat Turner all over the place. I'm good with it.
You're on the
And
record, Don.
we do have a couple of comments and a question.
Well, I've got to say this though, just off of what Tanesha said. It's very telling that as you travel the South, you find these Confederate statues and monuments and imagery in states that weren't even part of the Confederacy. So that in and of itself tells you all that you need to know about where this country is even now.
I mean, Don, I think one of our participants pointed out that the statues are in the North as well. So, I mean, racism.
They may be, I just never seen them.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's structural. It's part of the foundation of our country all the way back to, you know, the first Europeans that came here. So, you know, from the cultural experience of our first colonists who then brought in slaves to industrialize and have free labor in order to build this nation, so to speak, it really is undergirding pretty much everything across the country, whether we are aware of it or not. And so I would like to provide a question from one of our participants. The question is, what work can be done to combat systemic racism that is not fit for a federal or state level, but is available for us to do at the local level?
Well, I don't really feel like you can answer that question without addressing all three, right? Here's the issue, and I think this is very problematic, and this is why we'll never really get to solving the problem. One, in order to solve this issue, right, you gotta repair what's been done. In order to repair what's been done, you have to go back and redo all those policies. People do not realize that these policies that were built, a lot of people, see, it's so upsetting to me because I feel like we just don't really like connect with the fact that 1971 people were still dealing with race issues right here in Charlottesville. 1971, Black people were still integrating stuff here in Charlottesville, right? So imagine if we had that problem here in Charlottesville and we were one of the last states to actually integrate, right? Even when school integration happened, we were one of the last places to actually push it back. If we still dealing with policies that were written in like 1971 and we know that, or 1974, I like to use the Fair Credit Act, right? The Fair Lending Act as an example. That was put in place in like from 70 to 75. 74, I believe, is the accurate year. You can Google me if I'm wrong, but that was put in place in the 70s. And even today in 2020, Black people are more disproportionately affected by higher interest rates. Where's the Fair Lending Act? What's fair about that Lending Act? If you're still gonna charge me, I could have the same credit score as you, I could make more money than you, but because you're white and I'm Black, you're gonna get a better interest rate on your mortgage or your personal loan or your vehicle loan than me. Systemically, that's an issue. They're still saying you good enough on paper, but you're still not good enough because you're Black. That's problematic.
I think that's something that's got wide agreement in this circle, Tanesha, and I appreciate you laying it out like that. One thing I think that is challenging for a lot of us approaching this is the way it's all very interwoven. You know, you've got finance, you've got the physical safety, you've got educational inequities, you've got all these things, you've got housing and land policy that are very, very tied together with, you know, federal policies as well as state and local policies. How can sort of a regular citizen, like most of the people on this call, do something about it? How do you get on board and do things?
I can respond to that from my perspective. Obviously, I'm not Black, if that's not clear to everyone on the video. I am a transracial adoptee. So I am from Taiwan originally. And one of the things that's really prevalent in Asian culture is anti-Blackness, right? So we can look at this from all these different angles, but even as an Asian woman, I don't walk into spaces saying, hi, I'm here representing Black people or all Black people, because I'm not, okay? I can speak intersectionally to some of the challenges that are faced. And then when it comes to working on issues in which Black Lives Matter is my absolute priority, one of the things that has to come into that space as an individual is, number one, make sure that you are following Black leadership, period. That is so critical right now. And it is part of, to Tanisha's point, part of the reason that we have so many of the issues is because folks who are not Black come in writing policies saying that, yeah, we're trying to do the right thing for Black folks or for people of color in general. But what ends up happening is it's coming out through the lens and biases and implicit understanding that everyone has of what white culture is. You cannot dismantle something to which you haven't yet dismantled inside of yourself. So 2 pieces, it's an inside piece and an outside piece. The inside piece is to start doing the work yesterday on yourself, whatever that looks like for you. If it means that you need to feel compelled to start a book club with people, great, sure. But if it also means that you are putting yourself into spaces and places where you are vulnerable because you are not the majority, I would challenge you to step out of your comfort zone in following leadership of Black people in this community, because there's a ton of leadership. Black people are not a monolith, right? Tanesha believes differently than Dawn believes on certain things, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, if we're talking about Black Lives Matter, it means all of it, right? It means that every single human who is Black is allowed to have the same exact rights, freedoms, and liberties as someone who is white. And it's very interesting to me how what we tend to do is sort of, again, coming from the white lens, I grew up in a white family, so I can very much speak to the white lens, is similar to what one of my clients is doing right now. I do organizational culture consulting. And I have a client who got really, it's a group of 90 people that got super excited about equity and diversity and inclusion. So without discussing it with anyone, this group of 90 people has created equity groups within their company to try to explore issues of equity. There are 2 Black folks in the entire organization, and they are not involved in these equity groups because they're tired, the emotional labor is exhausting, and they don't want to have to talk about equity surrounded by their white peers. So what will happen if, you know, I'm doing some interventions with them to help them structure that, but it's terrifying at the same time that you have, you know, 90 white people essentially saying we can fix equity within our company. So again, do the inside work so that you very well know that you don't fix equity as a white person without voices of Black folks in the room in positions of leadership, not just let me do all this work and let Dawn read through it and give me the okay, right? That's not what the work looks like. It's really about from the ground up, making sure we're rebuilding systems with the voices of impacted people as part of the construction of those new realities.
My good friend, Reverend Phil Woodson over at First United says that you cannot deconstruct or dismantle the master's house using the master's tools.
Mm-hmm.
We have got to come up with some bold and innovative ways and some Promethean thinking about how we tear down these pillars of whiteness that have existed for so long. And it's not that it can't be done, it's just we have to figure out ways in which to do it. And much of that work has to be done by white people. Blacks didn't build the monster known as white supremacy. So that has to be at least begun to be torn down by whites. Blacks certainly will join in the fight and the efforts to do that. But much of that work has to come from within that monster that was created by someone other than ourselves.
Don, I want to follow up with a quick.
Sorry.
Sorry, Tanesha. You go ahead, Tanesha.
I just wanted to piggyback, like you can start all the equity commissions and all the different groups to solve the problems, right? But I think a lot of people do it to make it look good. Like they're really not about the solutions. Because if you were about the solutions, then people should know the people with the solutions are the people that are closest to the problems, that are facing the problems, that are dealing with the problems. And back to the earlier question about like, what does Black Lives Matter mean? It's so many levels to it. It's not just police killings. And I think that's the message that we keep trying to push to America, right? It's the police killings is just a portion of it. It's every level. Every level we're losing. Every level we're not being represented. Nate, you brought up a couple of areas like housing, education, healthcare. Well, let's talk about like venture capital and municipal bonds. Black people make up 1%. And so we wonder why there's no Black legacies or Black, you know, equity being passed down or big, you know, venture firms owned by Black people. Like on every level, we're losing. And that's the like whole Black Lives Matter and fight to me, that is deeper than just police killings. And we want America to see that.
If I can just share a little bit of my research, and it's been a few years since I presented on this, but just alone in the state of Virginia, there is $4.5 billion that moves outside of financial institutions. And that is among minority populations. Black families, Latino families, we're talking about Black Lives Matter, but Tanesha makes a very strong point in that we are actually losing at the local level by excluding populations from the systems that were built by white principles. And, you know, I'll just say my background is anthropology, and that I've done a lot of my research on this, and financially, we all lose when we're excluding populations from those systems. And when we built the systems specifically to exclude populations. So I would even say, you know, I sort of had an awakening in my education and personal life as well, but I'm as white as they come. So, you know, I might have learned a few things, but one of the things that I have a hard time maybe getting across to my peers is that the things that we're very comfortable doing are not comfortable for other people to use. I mean, this Zoom meeting is a clear example of that. We very easily have switched. We've got, you know, white collar positions for the most part in Albemarle County as a white population, comfortable using technology. This is how we communicate with each other. And this is not the platform that many other populations would prefer to spend their evening time and very valuable time that should be spent with their families to talk about the things that they feel can't be fixed. It's a frustration. It's not something you want to do when you're trying to find peace at the end of a long and difficult day. So, you know, if we can get outside the frame of what our normal lives are like as white America, we might be able to see that the very things that we're used to using, and we keep asking, well, why don't they come? Why don't people show up? Why aren't they here? And I've been in PTO meetings where they say, well, they didn't come. What are we going to do? We're going to do it by ourselves then. They didn't come because we did not go where other people are. We went where we are, where we white people are. We didn't go where anybody else is that we don't know about. We didn't ask, you know, can we join you? We said, come where we are and make it hard for other people rather than making it hard for ourselves.
Daisy, I'd love
That's all
to
I'm gonna
add
say.
something to that I think is so important. And this is something that when you're talking about doing that internal work on yourself, a great way to reframe this, and I learned this from Dr. Archana Pathak, who's a professor at UVA who does a lot around racial and gender studies. I went to a talk that she did, and the most powerful thing that has carried with me is rather than asking why people of color are not showing up, the actual question to ask yourself and your peers is, what are we doing to make it unsafe? Period. Like, that is so critical, because when you reframe it, you start to realize some of the things that Daisy's bringing up. There are scheduling issues. There are technology issues. What are the support systems, right? We talk a lot, this is connected too, just to mental health. And when you think about mental health, everyone likes to talk about suicide prevention, right? Oh, just call me. I'm available anytime. Just call me. If anyone that you know has ever experienced suicidal thoughts, a phone call is not what is going to help in that moment most of the time. When we talk about suicide prevention, and just like with Black Lives Matter, we need to be thinking systemically. And just like with mental health issues, it's really funny to me, in a not so funny way, how it's all connected, right? What we actually need is a social service network that provides affordable housing, gets rid of and dismantles food insecurity. All of these different stressors that exist, particularly for people that don't have the wealth and or privilege, are dealing with these issues every single day. And it's something that when I've, you know, the more that I do this type of work and the more that I really honor what's happening in the world right now, the number one thing that I believe, going back to the question about like county and government systems, number one thing that they could do is pay reparations. I don't know if you all realize this, but generational wealth in this country is very clearly delineated. White people have 10 times the generational wealth of Black folks. It's unacceptable, right? So we can talk a lot about how people feel, and we can talk a lot about individual acts of racism, right? Like, oh, I don't want to say something bad, or somebody said something mean to me. We're past that point. We need to dig out the roots of this. And to me, back to Tanesha's point, the financial component of all of this, until this country and these local, federal, and state governments are willing to say, we're going to put this money right back in your pockets. And here's the thing, that most of that money was stolen by the American government, for whether it was through free labor or through removing communities from the places in which they lived to make way for gentrification. Like, all of this stuff is happening at the local government levels as well. It's exactly what happened, in Vinegar Hill and all the other areas in town, if you're starting to understand a little more historical context locally. So to me, if organizations and systems are truly ready to take on a Black Lives Matter stance, they should be paying reparations. And that terrifies people, because what people think is that's going to take away from something else. But imagine how fewer systems in our social services network would be needed if everybody had enough money to live, right? If we really want to fix an issue, why don't we let people spend their money where they need to spend their money, rather than having to go through 50 channels to get a $50 grant to buy some milk for the week. It is so expensive to be poor in this country. And I know so many people that can't wrap their head around that still. So I would ask all of you, think about those things. The fact that we don't make things safe for people of color in most systems that we show up in, and that the financial piece, until you can literally look at a friend and say, I believe that we should pay reparations to Black people in this country at 10 times the amount, that they deserve. When you can comfortably say that and hold your ground on that, you can start to make some waves, because it is a massive, massive shift, because everybody in this country who is white with privilege, power, and generational wealth has zero lens on what life looks like, just, even one rung below that, let alone multiple levels of wealth below that.
I want
I would
to.
Well,
like to add,
hold on a
um,
second, Nathan.
I would like to
As a
add,
Black man, here's one thing that needs to change. The narrative itself has got to change. We need to stop talking about fixing the system. The system's not broken. I think we need to embrace the fact the system's working exactly as it was designed to do. We need to get rid of the system and start all over again. That's the only thing that's going to bring about any real and symbolic change.
All right.
Okay, I see Ange wanted to speak. Did you have a comment there?
I do. I just want to touch on what Amanda was saying. I just joined the conversation. When we're talking about these systems, and when we're talking about these organizations that want to provide support for Black and Brown, Indigenous communities, and other folks of color, I want to make sure that it's noted that the barriers are so high for whatever program that has been implemented, ones that stand, whether it be state, federal, or locally. The barriers are so high that folks cannot even attempt to apply for whatever assistance that's needed. And so if you want to work on something, I would suggest working on removing barriers to access resources. Also, I want to add that when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, and we're talking about, having like the yard signs and the raised fist and all of that is great. But if you're not executing that politically, like if you believe in electoral politics, and if you're not executing that that stance every day in electoral politics, and recognizing how these systems of oppression have historically been against Black folks particularly, and Indigenous folks, undocumented folks, other brown folks, and people of color, then it's really just a show. You're really just not even doing anything. You have to recognize that first, that these systems are in place for a reason. They've been there for a reason. It doesn't matter how you reform them, unless you're actually getting to the root cause of how these systems have manipulated Black and Brown and Indigenous communities throughout history, then you're really not doing anything to, alleviate the problems that are taking place. And that work begins in those said communities.
Ange, thank you so much for unmuting and sharing that comment, that explanation and comment with us. I wanna come back to well, I want to come back to a whole lot of things, and so in our 17 minutes or so, I'm going to try and do that. But one of them is I want to bring in Wayne just a little bit. You know, Don earlier was talking about coming up with some bold and innovative ways to tear down pillars of whiteness, white supremacy. What are some of those ways that you can think of? Some ways that you might have seen reparations or justice or peace building work in an international context that I know you have some experience with.
Well, I don't know how it relates so much on the international scene, but the peace building program that we had here in Charlottesville, for me, the awakening to Black Lives Matter and the whole situation here in Charlottesville was the actual walk of shame that we did when we walked with the director of the African American Heritage Center. I can't remember her name at the moment.
Andrea Douglas, I believe.
Yes, yes. And she explained to us how, you know, these neighborhoods where these statues and these courthouses were built were actually Black neighborhoods, that they were just devastated and these things were built here. And so for me and the students that I was mentoring, it was sort of like an awakening to the fact that this was happening. I walked by that stuff every day and had no idea that that was what was going on. And so that sort of got me interested in, you know, delving a little deeper in the situation and actually, you know, recognizing that my ignorance or ignoring the situation was making me a racist in the sense that the stuff was just still happening and I wasn't saying anything, you know, about it. So I think, and that's sort of what happened to the students that we were working as well on. That's why I was saying earlier, it's like, we need to be awakened to this stuff before we can actually make these big changes. But you know, recognize the fact that these changes are what needs to happen, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring in a bit of a different angle. The work of Ibram Kendi is resonates with me when I read through it, and one of the arguments he makes, and I'm going to oversimplify a little bit, is that bad policy, racist policies, didn't come from racist attitudes to start with, but rather the racist attitudes are partly a product of the racist policies, the creation of you know, underclass, you know, slaves, Black slaves. Is there a way locally to tackle policy that would change some of the racist attitudes that are still around?
You can only tackle the policy by putting the people at the table that you were set out to destroy, right? So, I mean, it would have to be more of us at the table building these policies. When you think about even in his work, right? You know, I read the book. Don and I had a conversation with him. The moral of the conversation that we did with him on CBS in the morning was, people may or may not be racist, true indeed, but we know that these very people created these racist policies, right? So no matter how you shake it, because I disagree with him totally. In order for you to create a policy like that, you clearly did not like people that look like me. So there's no way to say that, oh, they wrote the policy, but they're not racist. No, you are. Because you still set yourself out to shut out one type of individual or all types of individual of color, whether it was Black or whether you were Native American, it didn't matter. We were all shut out together back in those days. So in order to change those policies, we need to sit at the table. It needs to look like a conversation. We can't even get that on a Zoom meeting though. So how are we gonna get it at a table with creating policies? Every Zoom meeting I attend, every panel discussion I attend, Black people aren't there. And yes, true indeed, they don't feel comfortable coming into those spaces. But mentally, a lot of Black people believe nothing will change. So that's what you have to battle and tackle.
So I want to back you up on that a little bit, Tanesha. I know you and I have talked about this some, but I've sort of came to realize a few things about policies written supposedly to help, but in many cases hurt, especially families of color. One of those, I think you can look pretty easily and see that our families of color are disproportionately affected by social services removal from homes, children removal from homes in Albemarle County. We have one of the highest rates of children in foster care in the country. And most of those families are families of color. I don't think anyone knows that, except the social workers who are doing that work, following the policy that is written the way it is written, and doing their job, frankly. So it may seem that they're there to help children and help families, but in many cases, not only are we removing more children than anywhere else in the country from Black and brown families, we're also moving them outside of Albemarle County because we do not have enough homes in Albemarle County for those children to go to. So not only are those homes and families broken, those children are no longer residents of this county. So when we're talking about having only 10% residency among Black and brown families in Albemarle County, we're moving them out before they even have a chance to be adults and participate fully in our community.
Dr. Kendi points
ahead,
out that it's not just enough to be non-racist. You have to work daily to be anti-racist. And that in and of itself means tearing down those policies and those systems that are in place.
And I also think, to add to Daisy's point, you know, I'm certain that many people on this call or those involved with the Democratic Party have spoken up, gone to rallies, and talked all about how horrible the family separations are at our borders. And yet turn a blind eye to what's happening to your neighbor. And the other piece of this, as we look at the whole system of foster care, and it's incredibly toxic and incredibly racist. But here's the bottom line. Imagine someone coming to your home on your worst day as a parent. We've all had them if we have kids. The worst day where you're just horrified. It's usually the day I go and apologize to the kid and say, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have said that or done that or yelled at you, right? Imagine your worst day. A CPS officer comes to your house, removes your child from you, and then turns around and pays another family thousands of dollars a year to take care of your child. Not many people on this call could ever imagine that happening to you. I can tell you the neighborhood I live in is a very moderate to low income, young families, lots of population in our community that are Black and brown and Indigenous folks here. And one of the things that I've started to just start talking to neighbors, because I think, again, in this day and age, not everybody is really friends with their neighbors in the same way. I'm trying to get to know more of my neighbors because I'm terrified. I'm terrified that as this school year continues on, families are struggling. Families are having to work outside of the home while their children are home alone doing virtual school. And I'm sure many of you have read just all the various things that are happening with virtual schooling and kids getting in trouble for having a toy Nerf gun in their room, right? And sending in CPS to people's homes for those types of things. So I'm terrified that white families who have all the support systems, they can pay for nannies and tutors to come in and watch their children, are going to start calling CPS on families where you see little tiny Black and brown children running around the neighborhood unsupervised. So how do we mitigate these kinds of things, right? So one of the things I'm doing is talking to my neighbors and trying to come up with some networks, and not really a pod, like a paid school pod, but like a connected pod of people to say, hey, can we check in on your kids? Do they need to go out and get their lunches from the school bus route, right? These are things that I think every single person can do in your neighborhood to start with, and make sure that every family that has young kids is being looked after in a safe and responsible way. And even if that means that you bring a meal to a family who is working all day and trying to manage kids. There's just so many ways to do it. But again, just noticing the fact that we can be so outraged about separation of families at the border, and yet we do it all the time.
I want to call on Ange, who wanted to share a comment about Department of Social Services as well. You got the floor?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I had to unmute. In regards to DSS and foster care services, as a person who experienced that for the majority of my childhood, I grew up in foster care, group homes, and detention centers. I would like to add that when we're talking about the increase of the foster care population, foster children population in Charlottesville and Albemarle County, we need to also think about the resources that are unavailable to those said families. You know, and what circumstances are affecting those families and how to remove those the barriers. It always comes back to these barriers when we're talking about these systems. You know, when we're thinking about, oh, a child may not have food at their home, and we're going to take away those children without providing resources. Maybe they're unable to access TANF or food stamps. Maybe they exhausted all of their time with that program. Maybe they have a criminal record where they're ineligible to receive funds, or there's so many different circumstances in communities that we fail to neglect. That we neglect, right? When we're talking about placing someone in foster care or what is deemed a reason for removal. And just like Amanda said, we're actually a child in foster care, depending on the circumstances, could range actually monthly up to, I think it's in the thousands, depending on the circumstances, a month, not a year, a month. So what if we took that same money that we're spending to remove the child from the home and put that into the family that we're taking them away from? It does not make any sense to provide a home that we deem safe, or not we, but that the system deems safe, when we're not doing justice to the family that we're taking them away from, if that makes sense.
It does. Ange, thank you for sharing that perspective. We're down to about our last 5 minutes or so, and I've heard a couple sort of things we could do. Amanda suggested reparations, and also Amanda and Tanesha both talked about following Black leaders and doing work on yourself, whatever that looks like. Ange suggested removing barriers to access resources, including the example of Child Protective Services, or rather Department of Social Services in particular. Don, I want to ask you for now, what do you think is immediately relevant to Black Lives Matter locally? What can be done today or this week or this month?
Well, the removal of Johnny Reb was a huge step. Contacting your local representatives, your board of supervisors, your school board representatives, and continue to push for things that are important to the Black community.
What are those right now?
Well, I mean, the work that Amanda's doing with the Hate-Free School Coalition, get out and support that. We have a chair now of the school board who is a gentleman of color, Mr. Page. Get out to a school board meeting and find out what issues he's promoting, and if they fall in line with where you are politically and morally and spiritually, get in behind those. Much of what we want to see changed on the national level has to begin here at the local and grassroots level. And there's still a ton of work that needs to be done within what is perceived to be Albemarle County. There's still 2 statues that exist on UVA grounds that should be removed. write to President Ryan, write to the Board of Visitors, get involved with the local Black Student Alliance over there, with the local, the UVA NAACP. Find out what those things are, because since UVA insisted they're part of Albemarle County, then we need to hold their feet to the proverbial fire as well. And we need to continue to expand on those things. And I know we're talking Albemarle, but don't let up on the city of Charlottesville either, because it all intertwines and intersects in so many different ways.
Tanesha, I want to throw it to you as well. What is immediately relevant? What can be done this week or this month or certainly in the next few months?
Well, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna sum up everything. I think that people need to get involved on the education level. Daisy and I have a great relationship with holding the school board accountable. I'm in both the county and the city. I don't just do Charlottesville and Albemarle. I'm in Greene, I'm in Waynesboro, I'm all over with my advocacy work. But like children of color are disproportionately affected by individualized education plans and 504 plans that they're being misrepresented on. So we need to hold the school system accountable for that. Healthcare, Black women die way more at a higher rate than any other race having babies. Black people aren't getting transplants. Like, we have so many disparities, right? But these are things that if you work in this field, if you're an RN, if you're a nurse practitioner, if you're an LPN, if you're a doctor, and you know that these things are problems, then you need to speak up in these board meetings when you're sitting in these health system board meetings. Here, just locally here at UVA, in business, you know, I've been to a Rotary Club breakfast. I know the people that sit in the room. If you guys have access to letting someone of color in on knowing how to go about getting any type of business grant, any type of venture capital, you need to teach that game to the individuals that don't look like you. Because it's not that we're not in a position to gain this stuff now. We don't know how, we may not know how to do it exactly. I know so many people that own businesses and they could have $1 million idea and it never leaves a dinner napkin because they don't have anybody to back them up. They don't have any type of legacy money coming from their family or anything to help them. And then on a policy level, we have got to hit the ground running, holding people accountable, pushing policies, lobbying. I think we've gotten away from like what the power of lobbying. Listen, I will get you in an office, but I will work 10 times harder to get you out of an office. So as much as you support people and think, hey, I'm just gonna give a donation to this Democratic candidate or this Republican candidate, because at the end of the day, look, I don't care what you are. I worked in government. They all rub shoulders with each other. So it doesn't matter what you may or may not want to represent. I don't care about that. I care about you representing what people need that have been losing. So hold these candidates accountable. When they say that they're going to do something and they don't do it, call them out on it. Don't wait, call them out. And don't do it when it's popular. People like to join bandwagons and call people out when a group of people are mad at them. No, you do it when it's you the only one in the room calling somebody out. It's okay. I get that we're in a race war, but guess what? I don't care if you white. I don't care if you purple or blue, black, whatever. If somebody is doing something and it's not for the betterment or for the good for the people that they're claiming that they're representing, that is problematic. That's problematic. You are pushing the needle on white supremacy, and I don't stand for that. On a justice level, when somebody gets stopped by the police, record it. If you have a free day, you retire, and you have nothing to do with your time, go sit in court and see how people of color are disproportionately affected with way more time in the court system than any other race. We get way more time for doing the same crime that somebody white do. Go sit in traffic court. See how many people get pulled over for speeding. Listen to the neighborhoods. You will see that certain neighborhoods are over-policed. When you keep hearing the same officer's name over and over again, especially in Albemarle County, everybody know Andrew Holmes. He's one. His name is constantly just rinsed and reused in this community. File complaints, pull FOIA requests. This is stuff that people that have money, you can do this stuff because you have the access and the means to do it as to where someone else don't. So there's so many ways that you can get involved. And no, it's not all about money. I don't even want to push that message. But the fact is that if you have extra to spare, it takes 5 minutes to write an email and say, hey, I want to pull a FOIA request on X amount of officers that work this neighborhood or that neighborhood, and see the stops based on race, based on age group, based on a time period of 5 years back. I did it 10 years ago on an officer in Albemarle County because I knew what he was doing. He was only targeting Black people. He was racial profiling, and I knew it. And that was 10 years ago, before the news got involved, before anything. So a lot of people think that this is not new to me. I've been into this type of work since I was in the 8th grade. So I've been doing this a long time. Some people may think that I'm new to doing this type of work, but I work for Mitch Beniers and Senator Court. So I've been lobbying for a long time. I spoke in a committee meeting before I was able to drive a car. So this is not new for me. And so when people, and one more thing, and then I'm gonna end because I know other people gotta talk. Stop thinking because someone is loud or passionate about their work that they're being argumentative or that they're angry. I'm far from angry. My life is beautiful. But I just want to add that culturally I'm Black and my voice carry anyway. So y'all have never seen me in a great mood that my voice just carry anyway. So I'm never angry, but I'm very passionate about my work, and I'm very passionate about the people that I represent. And I'm very passionate about people from young to old getting what they need so that they're able to live a comfortable yet free life. And so don't get a misconception thinking that somebody is always angry. Far from angry. I've done way too much work to ever be angry, but I'm never gonna dumb down my message or dumb down who I am to cater to someone that just don't understand, because guess what? I've lived this life. I know what it's like. I've been affected by it. My father was affected by the mass incarceration system. I know what it's done to people that look like me. I know what it's done to people that went to school with me. I know what it's done to so many people, parents around me. So when you hear that passion come out of me, know that that passion is from experience, from living it, from seeing it, and from it being a revolving door, and it's still happening.
Tanesha, I appreciate you sharing your passion, and I think the sense that we all ought to be physically safe and economically secure and have the freedoms that that are supposed to be right there for everybody is powerful stuff that you share. And that's a good summation. I do want to do a quick close for let's hear 1 minute from Amanda, Wayne, and then I want Deacon Don to give us a charge and benediction.
Cool. So for me, I would share similarly to everyone else. I mean, a lot of it is just do the work, get out there and do the work and get really uncomfortable, because your discomfort, if you are a white person stepping into this work, your discomfort is a good measure for where you are, because you should stay pretty uncomfortable as long as you're doing this work. And the reason for that is, I'm still uncomfortable in a lot of this work because I want to make sure that I'm constantly learning and growing, and we're always uncomfortable when we're growing. I would also say support with regard to voting. I'm personally still on the fence with how the presidential portion of this is going to go and how I'm going to interact with that, but I am definitely voting down ballot, as I always do, because I think that's a really critical piece to what we're talking about today, is that local leadership level. I think the biggest thing is just find what you're passionate about. We've talked about a lot of different issues today, and I think the biggest takeaway, if this is all very overwhelming to you in hearing all these different ways that discrimination and racism really do impact people, the challenge is it literally exists in every single system that we are all in. So if you have a passion around healthcare, there's a way to plug into a Black Lives Matter movement and priority in that space. If education is your thing, if mental health is your thing, literally every system has a component where racism is alive and well. So I'd say pretty much anywhere your interests are, there's a way to plug into this work. And then finally, with regard to putting your money where it needs to go. Obviously, we're not at a space and time in history where reparations are just going to magically happen. One of the ways that I commit to doing that type of work is making sure that I have a circle of folks who I am consistently sending funds to for various activist work. Also, Congregate Seville has a link that you can put money into that helps support our various bonds and court fees, things of that nature for people that are taking physical risks with their personal body. And then lastly, I would say there's a new group that has started up fairly recently called the Black Youth Action Committee, BYAC. Please support their work. Right now, about once or twice a month on Sundays, they're doing mutual aid on the downtown mall and working with folks there who are in need of food, shelter, etc. So they are taking monetary donations through Congregate Seville if you want to support them in that way, or actual donations of supplies. They're giving out masks, hand sanitizers, things of that nature to people who basically are living on the downtown mall in that area that might not have access to those things. So lots of ways to plug in. And I would say maybe if people do have questions or curiosity of like, here's my passion area, but I don't know who to talk to, because we keep telling everybody, please make sure you're following Black leadership. Please, reach out to this group's email, and they can certainly reach out to anyone on this panel, and we can help triage
Absolutely.
and connect.
And I would just add that Tanesha and Amanda both suggested a bunch of things. If you two can send any of that to rio@albemarledems.org, we'll include it in the notes when we send out the video of this
Perfect.
talk tonight. Wayne, last minute.
Well, I have to say I agree with Amanda. Do the work, get involved, get uncomfortable, become vulnerable. I mean, it's the only way you're going to learn about it, the only way you're going to have an effect on it. And I just recently read a book, Between the World and Me. The author's name is Coates, and it's about a letter to a Black father's son about how to negotiate the world. And oh my God, it just opened my eyes to things that I never even thought about. So that's the big thing. Get yourself awoke to all this.
Thanks, Wayne. And Don Gathers, please close this with another minute here. Not literally benediction if you don't want to.
Nope. I'll just say that, Father, you are called many names. We pray right now that what has been done and said here has indeed been uplifting to you and uplifting spiritually to those who joined in with us. We're thankful for those who have been here with us, and we understand and pray that many more would have come, but we meet people where they are. So as we depart from this particular presence, this existence this evening, but never from you, Lord, we just pray for continued safety. We pray for continued education. We pray for continued progression as we strive to move the needle forward to the living that you would have us to be in. We look to continue to work in your will and in your way, and we just continue to want to embrace you, love you, and be the people that you've called us to be. Therefore, we lift this prayer up to you in the precious, powerful, holy name of Jesus. Amen. Thanking each and every one here this evening, and just being thankful for all the education that's been provided.
Well, I want to thank you, Don, and thank everybody. Thank you, Don Gathers, longtime social justice activist. Thank you, Tanesha Hudson, community activist, organizer, and filmmaker. Amanda Moxham with the Hate Free Schools Coalition, and Wayne Murphy, the Peace Building Chair of Rotary Club District 710. Quick plug for a couple things. I wear another hat as the manager of a radio station in town, and we are putting on the Black Business Expo in collaboration with Ty Cooper and a few other partners. That's going to be on Saturday, September 26th, starting at noon. I just mentioned it because Tanesha did mention some things about economic power and Black business, Black-owned business. And that is it's all virtual this year at blackbusinessexpo.org. You can check it out now and sign up. It's Saturday after next. Also a reminder that next month on Wednesday, October 21st at 7, we're going to be joined by 5th District U.S. Congressional candidate Dr. Cameron Webb, talking about racial disparities in healthcare and the need to get out the vote, especially for him.
Yeah.
Don't forget, you can vote early this year. You can request an absentee mail-in ballot today. You can also do early in-person voting at the county registrar's office. That begins this Friday, September 18th. You can find out more about all these things at elections.virginia.gov. Thanks again, everybody. And thank you all for coming out tonight on this.
So Nathan, I did want to let people know we do have extended hours at the registrar's office for early voting. Do you know what those hours are?
I don't know the hours off the top of head. Hopefully it's on their website.
Yeah, I believe it starts in 2 weeks that we'll have evening hours and weekend hours. So definitely every opportunity we can to get out there and put our votes in.
Yeah, I just talked with the staff.
Is that both the city and the county?
At least for the county. I'm not sure for the city, but I imagine they will be as well. Also, I want to give a shout out for Tanesha, Legacy Unbroken is her film. Please look for that as well. I believe you can find that on Google if you search for it. So Tanesha, do you want to share? Didn't realize you were still here. Yes, please.
It's on Vimeo. Legacy Unbroken, the story of Black Charlottesville. You can pull it up on Vimeo. But if you Google it, it'll pop up.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you all again so much for joining us this evening, and we will circle back soon.
Thank
Vote,
you.
everybody vote. Yes.
Please
you.
vote. Big time vote.
And carry someone with you.
Well, I don't know if I've shared, but we have a new voter in our household, so I'm excited to bring along a new one this year.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks so much.
Good night.
Yeah.